The drums began before dawn. Not the horrid drums of warning. Not the broken rhythm of mourning. These were deep, steady, confident beats, like a heart that knew its strength. They rolled across the red earth of Omudara village, climbed over the thatched roofs, slipped through the tall Iroko trees, and settled into the bones of every man, woman, and child. It was the sound of peace, the sound of a kingdom that was thriving. And at the center of it all sat King Adeyemi. He was not born into ease. Those who remembered his youth spoke of a boy who walked barefoot across cracked land, who fetched water from a distant stream, who watched his people suffer under rulers who took and never gave. But when his time came, when the crown rested upon his head, he chose a different path. Under his reign, farms flourished, roads were cleared, trade returned, children laughed louder, hunger became a memory whispered by the elders, not a reality lived by the young. The people loved him, they did not fear him, they did not merely respect him, they loved him. And that was what made him dangerous. Because in every place where light grows strong, shadows gather. Among those closest to King Adeyemi were three men who never left his side. Chief Bamidele, the king's advisor, a man whose voice was smooth as palm wine and whose smile never reached his eyes. General Sadiq, commander of the royal guard, broad-shouldered and silent, always watching. And Obina, the keeper of the treasury, who counted every grain of wealth as though it were his own child. To the king, they were loyal, trusted, brothers in duty. To each other, they were something else entirely. It began slowly, like a crack in a clay pot, small, almost invisible. One evening, as the sun melted into gold behind the hills, Chief Bamidele sat beneath a baobab tree with Obina. Between them rested a calabash of palm wine, untouched. You see how they chant his name? Bamidele said quietly. Obina did not look up. It is the way of the people. No, Bamidele replied, his voice tightening. It is not the way. It is worship. Obina's fingers paused over his counting beads. And what is wrong with that? He asked. Bamidele leaned closer. When a king becomes bigger than the throne, those beneath him become invisible. Obina said nothing, but the seed had been planted. Days later, General Sadiq joined them. He did not come for wine. He came with questions. The king plans to reduce the guard, Sadiq said. He says the village no longer needs such protection. And you? Bamidele asked. Sadiq's jaw tightened. A general without soldiers is a man without purpose. Silence fell between them. Three men, three ambitions, one king standing in their way. It was then that Bamidele spoke the words that would change everything. There is another, he said. Someone who sees what we see. Obina frowned. Who? Bamidele's eyes darkened. The priest. The village priest, Baba Ifakunle, was a man feared even by those who claimed not to believe. He lived on the edge of the forest, where the air was thick and the light struggled to enter. People went to him for blessings, for protection, and sometimes, for things the dared not name. When the three men arrived at his shrine, the wind itself seemed to hold its breath. Baba Ifakunle did not greet them. He simply said, "You come with heavy hearts, and heavier intentions." Bamidele stepped forward. "We come for balance." The priest laughed softly. Balance is the word men use when they mean control. General Sadiq shifted uneasily. Obina's hands trembled. But Bamidele stood firm. "The king grows too powerful," he said. "If he continues, there will be nothing left for others. No influence, no authority, no future." The priest's eyes gleamed. "And you wish to stop him?" "Yes, and what will you offer in return?" That was when the room changed. Because greed speaks loudly, but sacrifice whispers. And whispers are far more dangerous. Obina hesitated. Sadiq looked away. But Bamidele answered, "Anything." The priest smiled. "Be careful," he said softly. "The spirits listen when men speak like that." The first sign that something was wrong came quietly. A farmer's crops failed overnight. Green leaves turned black. Soil that had once been rich became dry and lifeless. The farmer wept, but the people said it was just misfortune. Then a child fell ill. No herbs could cure her. No prayers seemed to reach her. Then another, and another. Whispers began to spread. The spirits are angry, some said. We have offended the ancestors, others claimed. King Adeyemi refused to accept it. We will find the cause, he said. There is always a reason. But not all reasons are meant to be seen. Behind the scenes, the conspirators moved carefully. Bamidele fed the king false counsel. Obina quietly redirected resources meant for relief. And Sadiq ensured that certain voices never reached the throne. Still, the king remained strong. Still, the people believed in him. And that belief began to frustrate the darkness. One night, Baba Ifakunle summoned them again. You are too slow, he said. Bamidele frowned. The village is weakening. Not enough, the priest snapped. As long as the king stands, the people will endure. Sadiq stepped forward. Then what do you suggest? The priest's voice dropped to a whisper. We break the king, from within. Those words hung in the air like smoke. How? Obina asked, his voice barely audible. The priest smiled, by turning his heart against itself. The plan was cruel, precise, and devastating. They began with whispers. A rumor here, a doubt there. The king favors some families over others. He hides wealth from the people. He has angered the gods. At first, the people resisted. No, they said, not our king. But doubt is a patient thing. It does not shout, it lingers. And slowly, it grows. The final blow came on a night when the moon refused to shine. A sacred artifact, an ancient symbol of the village's protection, was stolen from the shrine. By morning, the entire village was in chaos. This is a curse, the elders cried. Who would do such a thing? The people demanded. And then, the accusation came. The king. It was Bamidele who spoke it aloud. The artifact was last seen in the palace, he said. Only those close to the king could have taken it. Gasps filled the air. King Adeyemi stood before his people, confusion written across his face. I would never, but his words fell on ears already poisoned. Even Sadiq stepped forward. My king, perhaps there is something you have not told us. That was the moment the king realized the truth. Not from their words, but from their eyes. Betrayal does not hide well. It reveals itself in the silence between sentences. In the hesitation before loyalty. In the absence of trust. You, the king said quietly, looking at them one by one. Bamidele did not flinch. Obina looked away. Sadiq said nothing. The crowd turned restless. Doubt became anger. Anger became rage. And just like that, the love that had lifted a king began to pull him down. King Adeyemi was not imprisoned. He was abandoned. Stripped of authority, stripped of trust, left alone in the palace that once echoed with loyalty. Days passed, then weeks. The village continued to suffer. But something strange began to happen. The conspirators, who had once stood united, began to fracture. Obina grew paranoid. He saw threats everywhere. Sadiq became restless. Sleep abandoned him. And Bamidele became desperate. Because power gained through darkness does not bring peace. It brings hunger. And hunger is never satisfied. One night, Obina confronted Bamidele. This was not the plan, he said. The village is dying. Bamidele's eyes burned. It is the price of change. No, Obina snapped. It is the price of greed. Before Bamidele could respond, Sadiq stepped in. We have gone too far, he said. For a moment, silence held them. Then Bamidele laughed. You think you can turn back now? He said. You think the spirits will simply forget? As if summoned by his words, The air grew cold, and from the shadows, Baba Ifakunle appeared. "You made a promise," the priest said. Obinna trembled. "We gave you what you wanted." The priest shook his head. "No," he said softly. "You gave me permission." And then the truth unfolded. The suffering, the sickness, the chaos. It was never meant to stop, because the priest did not serve balance. He served destruction. One by one, the conspirators realized the trap they had walked into. But realization is not redemption. Meanwhile, in the quiet of the abandoned palace, King Adeyemi sat alone. He had lost everything: his throne, his people's trust, his closest allies, but he had not lost himself. And sometimes, that is enough. An old woman came to him one evening. She was bent with age, her voice soft but steady. "My king," she said, "do you still believe in your people?" He looked at her, tired but unbroken. "I do," he said. "Then stand," she replied. "What good will that do?" She smiled. "Truth does not shout," she said, "but it does not die either." The next morning, the king walked into the village square. No guards, no crown, no throne, just a man, standing before his people. At first, no one listened. Then one voice spoke, then another. And slowly, the silence broke. Because beneath the fear, beneath the doubt, there was still memory. And memory is powerful. The truth began to surface. The lies unraveled. The conspirators were exposed, not by force, but by their own collapsing secrets. Bamidele fled into the forest, never to be seen again. Obinna confessed, his guilt consuming him. Sadiq fell to his knees before the king, tears in his eyes. "I was wrong," he said. "I chose fear over loyalty." King Adeyemi looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "And now you must choose what comes after." As for Baba Ifakunle, the people went to his shrine. But it was empty. Only ashes remained, as though the darkness, once revealed, had no place left to hide. In time, the village healed. Slowly, painfully, but it healed. And when the crown returned to King Adeyemi's head, it was no longer just a symbol of power. It was a reminder that betrayal often wears the face of loyalty, that greed can destroy even the closest bonds, and that truth, no matter how buried, will always find its way back to the light. The drums returned, not as loud as before, not as proud, but steady, wiser, because this time, the village understood something it had never known before. A good king is a blessing, but a watchful people, that is protection.